This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This is Sarah, and I just want to take a moment to speak to you about this week's sponsor, Favor. Favor, Inc. is a statewide family-led nonprofit 501c3 organization that is committed to empowering families as advocates and partners in improving educational and health outcomes for our children. Favor is the Connecticut state organization of the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. Favor offers a single place for families with children who have medical, mental, emotional, and behavioral health challenges to find information, assistance, and training. To find out more about Favor, please go to favor-ct.org. We are grateful for our opportunity to work with Favor as a sponsor, and now on to the rest of the episode. This is Sarah with a disclaimer for this week's episode. This week's episode may not be suitable for young children as it has mild adult language. It would be rated on a television scale of TV-14 or a movie scale of PG-13. This week's episode, entitled #ShitMyMomSays, is definitely for a slightly more mature audience. That being said, the topic is absolutely hysterical. It is relatable for caregivers, family caregivers, and professional caregivers, and I hope that you enjoy this week's episode. Here it is. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Chronicles. Today I have Bobby Hedglin-Taylor with us. He is an author, a trapeze artist, an actor, a dancer, a singer, and a stand-up comic. And he recently wrote a book called #ShitMyMamaSays. Bobby, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I am so thrilled to have you. I've been reading your book today, and it is absolutely hysterical. Your mom, I just want to say really quick, your mom sounds like she would either be my absolute favorite resident if I had her as a patient, or my least favorite. I'm not sure.
She had her moods.
She probably would be my favorite, though.
Yeah.
Sometimes the ones with the extra toughness, where I always had a little soft spot for them.
Yeah.
So would you like to further introduce yourself to my audience?
Sure. Well, so I am all those things. In a podcast interview a couple of months ago, somebody called me the multi-hyphenated artist. And I said, well, I'm going to use that. I think I like that. See, I live in New York City, and if you're going to make it here, you're going to make it anywhere, but you have to be able to support yourself in New York City if you do not have financial resources. I was born in a poor family in Pennsylvania. I paid for college myself and still paying for college. And so there's a lot that goes into living here, and you have to be able to turn on a dime and be able to make money to support yourself. There's just no way you can survive without it. So I did all of those things. I was an actor, dancer, singer, trapeze artist. I still dabble in all of those things as well. My biggest change was in actually April 20th, 2021. I had hip replacement. So my acrobatic life is much different than it was before. I can still do some things. I can still go up in the air a little bit, but it's not to the intensity that I was used to, and it never will be. But that being said, during the pandemic, my mom passed very early. March 21st, 2020, mom passed from what we believe was COVID, because the next day I woke up with COVID. And because there were no tests at that point that were able to and I didn't want to have an autopsy on my mom, just let her go peacefully. Through all of that, you deal with the trauma of being a former caregiver. And, my mom was a very special lady, as you know from reading the book. She had a way to coin a phrase, and I started I started writing the book. I guess you could say I started writing it when she first got diagnosed with what we knew was dementia. And the early onset of dementia probably hit around 2009. But I didn't start sharing with the hashtag on social media until around 2013. Um, and then from 2013 till her passing, whenever we would meet, whenever we would have, I would visit her, she would always have one of those sayings, or she would call me and something would pop up. And so I just would share them on social media. And then a good friend of mine helped me after mom passed, helped me find all of them from all of my social media, because they had, hashtag, 2014, 15. And so I compiled them all into one spot and then started to edit them down. And then I had many angels around me. Um, some being former, former editors, former writers, some actual current writers. My friend Susie, who lives around the corner, who I've known for 10 years, that did not know that she was an editor. And so she helped me. And a lot of people helped me. And I think that because writing is not in my wheelhouse, I always made sure that I had a chance to um, take whatever I had, whatever skill I had, and then share it with other people. This is the other thing too. Be careful who you share your work with. My former therapist has a saying: "Don't go to the apple tree if you want cherries." And if you share your work, if you're an artist and you share your work with somebody, not they don't always come back to you with, "Oh, that's perfect, you're fabulous." And some people are a little gruff about it. Some people, it may trigger something in them that they just don't like it when old ladies talk and use foul language. That was my mom. Whether you like it or not, that was my mom. But you have to pick and choose. And there are some stuffy people who are like, I would never do that to my mother. I would fall, 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 fall. And they would never tell my mother stories like that. I'm like, fine, I do. And there's obviously the book is doing well. It's selling worldwide. I have people that sent me messages who are caregivers who at least got it's a small book. I'm not gonna pretend it's something it's not. It's a very small book. It reads in under an hour, and the quotes are just each page is a different interaction with me and my mom. But I've gotten messages from Spain, from Mexico, UK, New Zealand, Canada, Germany, Sweden, Ireland, and people just they found the book online or they saw a podcast that I was on, and they were moved and touched by the connection my mom and I have, and the connection I have to comedy is through her, because that was her coping mechanism from the earliest parts of my childhood that I can remember. My mom was a jokester, and she was also a whiz at electricity. She could wire speakers everywhere. So we had speakers that went into the garden, into the chicken coop, out into the front lawn, on the porch, in the house, and she would play incessantly on 8-track or vinyl, because we're back in the 70s here. Um, Stand-up comic routines. George Carlin, Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy. Whoopi Goldberg was later, Louis Anderson much later, Roseanne Barr later. But all the Borscht Belt comedians, Jackie Mason, Joan Rivers, Don Rickles, Dom DeLuise. And she would play them on loop. And it would just be like there was always comedy in the house. And there was always country music for some reason at the same time. But I digress. So with that, she was listening and she was learning the science of telling a joke. And so she would repeat a lot of those. And some even like in her, I took some out of the book because they weren't her quotes. She was just repeating a Louis Anderson joke, or like there was Louis Anderson had this funny sketch. I can't remember what it was, but was basically Louis was picking on his little brother, and his little brother was crying. He was like, I'm gonna have rabies, and his mother yelled at him, "Are you on dope?" You know. And then she goes, "Well, then give me some." So my mother would throw these little tidbits out because she knew it would change the energy of the room. Whether she intellectually understood that was a different case, but she knew how to make the science of that joke work, even to her dying day. Like the last photo I have of my mom and I is from FaceTime because we were talking the day before. She wasn't feeling great. She had been in and out of the emergency room, but they got her up on Friday. She wasn't feeling great, but the last picture is us laughing together. And that's the way I remember her. That's the way I want to remember her. Because death is traumatic no matter how you dress it up. No, and it's not pretty. It's not peaceful. It's, there are sometimes, oh, she died peacefully in her sleep. It's not. The one blessing that I can say is when the doctor called me and the nurses were talking to me, they were like, we got her up. She was sitting at the nurse's station and she was mid-sentence and she just slumped over. And by the time they got her back to the bed, she was gone.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the most rock and roll way to go out. She didn't suffer. She didn't, I mean, yes, there was suffering when you're a resident in any nursing home, that it's just not comfortable. It's not your home. You may be surrounded by familiar things that they tell you. I would bring different pictures, and I would always have a Christmas tree for her. But it's not your home. It's just like it looks like a hospital. So, she wasn't 100% happy there, but I was happy because I knew she had 24-hour care because she lived with me for a short period of time. And during that period of time, I wasn't living myself. I was calling out of work a lot. I was sleeping in a chair next to her in the living room. She was on the couch because if she got up to go to the bathroom, she would fall. So I'd have to get her again. She always had to go to the bathroom 2 or 3 times a night. So if there's any caregivers out there listening, check thyself before you wreck thyself. Make sure, and this is the best adage, the best quote about caregiving that I found. When you're on an airplane and they talk about the oxygen mask, put your mask on first before you help the elderly or children. Why? Make sure that you are safe to protect them. And it's the same thing with, our masking situation. You and I were talking about masks because, here we are, year 2 of a global pandemic, and people are still coming down with COVID. And, we still have to protect the vulnerable population. That doesn't mean that, oh, it's gone. Everybody, take your mask off. Just because things are lightening up worldwide does not mean that it's over. There are multiple waves that can come. And like you and I were also talking, we kind of feel like this is going to end up being like the flu. It's going to be a yearly shot that we have to get just to bump up our immune system. But I feel like for me, knock wood, I pray that the worst is over.
Yeah.
So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I really hope that the worst with COVID is over as well. I was a healthcare worker working in a long-term care facility in the beginning of the pandemic. And I know how hard it was for my residents to not be able to see their families. And I know how hard it was for the families. And we tried so hard while we were scared, am I going to bring this home? Am I going to I have kids. Kids catch everything. Is taking my kid to the grocery store a good idea? Am I going to end up getting this from one of my kids and bringing it into work? I had that fear as well. But before we started this interview, I had lost 19 residents to COVID in my facility in September of 2021. And you told me that you had lost a lot of family and friends to COVID. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
8 relatives. Yeah, 8 relatives, including my mother. two fairly recently. The ones that were lost between March and December of 2020 were all there was no vaccine. The ones most recently were unvaccinated, unfortunately. Um, and ironically, we had for the 6 people that had passed by August of last year, we had a group memorial service, and for the family members we lost, and one had died from cancer, but there were the others were COVID related. My mom, her sister's husband, and then I lost 17 friends on top of that, countrywide, because the wave happened in such a weird way that it started here in March, because I live in Queens, New York, which was the epicenter of the outbreak. Your friend circle in New York is large. So my friend Rick, brilliant piano player, I've known him for over 35 years. I see a posting on Facebook that he's gone, or that he's sick and he's going in. Then in June, I message a close friend in Colorado, and I wished him a happy birthday, because our birthdays are a day apart, and we've known each other since we were in Boy Scouts together in the 70s. And he was like, "Yeah, I think I have COVID." Blah blah blah. I was like, "Okay, make sure you take care of yourself." Blah blah blah. August 8th, he was gone. And I was talking to him up to the day that he got intubated, and on Facebook, Facebook chat, and it was just, "Hey, how are you feeling today? Hey, I'm gonna have to get back to you. The nurse is coming to talk to me." Then he was like, "Okay, in about an hour, I'm gonna be put on a ventilator, and so I'll chat with you on the other side," I think was his last message. So you get that firsthand experience, because it's not just that somebody that close to you is dying. It's that you can't do anything. You can't leave your house. You can't go see them in the hospital. Luckily, I was friends with his daughter, so I was keeping up with her posts as they were happening, and we thought he was going to come out of it, but he never did. I have another friend who was intubated for 88 days, and he came out of it, and he survived, and he wrote a book. And so
Amazing.
yeah, Dave Paris is his name, and I believe it's called A COVID Story. But basically, it's his journey as a circus performer. It's another one of my hashtag circus. I worked in the circus world for 35 years. So Dave was a muscular partner dancer, acrobat, and he got COVID and was in for 88 days. And then there's this beautiful video. I get emotional thinking about it, but it was a beautiful video of him dancing with his nurse before he got released. And then we had a big parade outside of his house as he was coming home. All the circus people, we all stayed apart. Everybody's waving and had our masks on and welcoming him home, because he made it, but not everybody did.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's beautiful
that's
what you
the
did for your
hardest part.
friend.
Yeah. And so we take what you can, because it was just so surreal. It was like being in a movie where like you always watch the horror. I don't know if you watched 80s horror movies, but it was like, "Oh yeah, Jenny's dead," like, what? And then the next day it was like, "Oh, and so so's gone," and they were, and then there'd be a Facebook post, and then not to mention that in that whole year, losing 17 friends to COVID, but then my agent died of cancer. A dear friend died of a stroke. So it was like you're bombarded. If COVID didn't happen, those probably would have been the only two substantial deaths in my world. But I had been through so much, from my mother to my aunt, and then to my uncle. They rolled out almost monthly, like the notices on Facebook, and I hate that Facebook now has memories, because you posted a year ago that oh, mom died a year ago on 2021, or or this was the week that mom was in the ER, and and they like this past month, like future March, if anybody lost anybody in March of 2020, take the month off. Don't go to work. Go to a tropical island and turn off Facebook. Because I honestly, like, as much as I love social media because it's a great way for me to connect to people that I know and I've known for years who live far away, but the memories are sometimes very pleasant and they're very fun. Like, I have this one video that I post every Easter, and it's just me in my studio rolling around on a scooter with bunny ears. And I did it as a joke for people because they were like, we people were there was it's just wasn't a contest. It was just like, post your favorite Easter videos, and I it's just me on a razor scooter doing some circus tricks with bunny ears. That pops up every year, and I always get a chuckle out of it because I'm like, oh my god, I was so skinny. It's like that was 30 pounds ago. I got the COVID 30, not the COVID 19. But it it's a double edged sword because you get the pain all over again, the reminder all over again, the reminder of that phone call that morning. And just like in the beginning of my book, the first thing I do is start with the phone call,
Yeah.
because it was so, um, first of all, I'd never heard when you're talking to somebody about passing that you say the person expired. I don't know who decided this, but my mother was not a carton of milk, you know. Passed away, is much more gentle. I actually was like, what do you mean she expired? Did she fart? She was gassy. She was always gassy. She was farting at the most inappropriate times. So again, my coping mechanism is humor. So I immediately hear that and I start to, do the Dora the Explorer drink, a blink, like, what do you mean? And then the nurse called and she's like, do you want to come sit with the body? And I was like, do people do that? I don't know. I haven't I haven't experienced death on this level. So and then what happened, when I got there was even worse because they had already had her prepped for the morgue. So she was in a shroud. She was naked under a plastic shroud with a toe tag. And I couldn't look at her. I couldn't touch it or touch her or anything like that. And it was like so cold. There was nobody there to greet us. There was nobody there for comfort. It was just sort of like, you know, we bagged all of her stuff up if you want to go through it and take it with you. And if you want to donate anything, there was one nurse who came by and said, I'm sorry. And then one resident was still on the floor because what they do whenever somebody passes in this particular nursing home, they take everybody upstairs to the activity room, and they either play bingo or they'll do something to distract them while the body gets removed. Um, there was one person still on that floor, and that was one of my mother's friends, Diane. I'll never forget her. She was so sweet, and she just she grabbed my hand. She said, "I'm so sorry about your mom." She said, but she and no, she had a best friend. Her best buddy was Josephine. And so my mother's best buddy had died about a month earlier. And she's like, she and Josephine are playing the fiercest game of bingo up there right now. And that was what she said to me. And it made me laugh. And, that those little moments of trauma take a long time to, you blame yourself. You go through all of that. Why wasn't I there for my friend Rick? Well, Rick didn't call me and tell me he needed anything. And the other thing, when I got sick, this is something that's very interesting. I didn't post about it. I didn't tell anybody about it. I was vague booking, as they say on Facebook. And my dear friend Phoenix, I thank the world that I have good friends, because Phoenix noticed, she's like, I know something else is up. I know your mom just passed, but what's going on? And I messaged her. I said, I have COVID. She said, what's your address? Gave her my address. Literally within a day or two, a box arrived at my front door, and it was all these medicinal herbs from a farm upstate New York. and there was a thing called fire cider, which I highly recommend. But all of those herbs, those liquid herbs, I started taking them, and within 3 days, I had no fever, I had no cough, I could breathe, I felt like I had my energy back. Whether or not the virus had progressed through my body by the time those herbs arrived or not, that connection to a friend, first of all, but that also that those herbs trigger your immune system to kick into high gear. So here's what I did. I found the farm is called the Tweefontein Farm. It's up in New Paltz, New York. But they have what's called the immune booster. It's a small package and it's like $40. So every time someone posted on Facebook that they were sick, most of them, if I had the extra $40, I sent it to them, and they all recovered, and they all felt better. Trust me, these things taste horrible, so you have to mix them with juice. You have to, I'm not, but I will say, fire cider in particular has all of the hot vegetables in it. It's got garlic, it's got onions, it's got horseradish, but it also has turmeric, it has cayenne pepper. It has all the things that trigger your immune system to fight whatever's attacking it. So whether or not that worked, I still know that I gave my friends something, because we didn't have anything. That the medical community was so bogged down. They were literally turning people away from the ER and from urgent care. If you could breathe, if you could talk, if you made it to the door without being able to, without passing out, then if you didn't need an ambulance, go back home, call your GP, take Tylenol, take vitamin C, vitamin D. That's all we had. So here was this sort of like secret weapon that came to me, and I said, oh, well, divine intervention. If it worked, if that's what helped me, then I'm blessed. And if it helped the people that I sent it to, I'm even more blessed. And I still say that we as a society wait for the medication. We wait for the doctors to say, take this pill. And thank God we do have, excuse me, the new antiviral that came out. It's supposed to be very effective. But I wish we had that in 2020. My mom was in her 80s, but she was very healthy for an 82-year-old. And she was bouncing back. Every time she went to the ER, she was bouncing back. This is another thing that I found out, and was that a lot of the nurses and staff from different hospitals and different nursing homes had been experiencing COVID in February of 2020. They didn't know what it was, and we were blindsided by it as a society. And I think that in itself says a lot about how it was handled, and where and how we can do better. And that's the difference of being a caregiver. It's right there in the word caregiver. I am taking care of somebody else so they don't die. And that's also, like, I can imagine, from you being a caregiver in a facility, you get attached to people. It's hard, because I loved my mother's friends. She had the loveliest friends. Maggie was one of her friends who was in the bedroom next to her. Maggie would come in and say, and Maggie always had brightly colored tights on, and she had emphysema and she had dementia, but she would come in before bed every night and she would say, good night, Mary Lou. She'd always wave to mother. And when she passed, it really affected my mom. And then when Josephine and my mom were they were Thelma and Louise of the nursing home. They were inseparable. They would hang out in each other's rooms. They would talk incessantly. They both loved country music. They would watch TV together. And then when Josephine died, it's even in the story, I think, too. She said, my mother said, oh, Josephine quit. She's not going to work here anymore. And whether that was mom's way of coping with it, or if it was just her dementia thinking that she was still at work, because she thought that she was working there, so it's tough. It's a tough thing that we take on, but we do it selflessly. That's one of the things that I can say. I did it for my mom. I would do it again. I would do it for any of my relatives, that needed it. There's a chance to help them onto the, it's a chance to help them to the other side,
Yeah.
but not literally. I mean, just, easing their pain while they're in that, my mom would have bouts of anger. She wouldn't know how to deal with it. She wouldn't know where it came from. And yet she still was her sunny, funny self, but,
Yeah.
that in itself takes its toll on you as a caregiver, though.
Yeah. No, all of that is really beautiful. And I actually was really nodding and agreeing with you when you were talking about when they called and said your mom had expired and they used that term. I remember the first time I heard that term, I was 17 and a nurse was writing in her notes, patient expired. And I was like, I hate it. I cringe. I still cringe at that term, even being a healthcare worker. It's very common. I just wanted to put that out there that even as a healthcare worker, I hate that term too. Um, a lot of us don't like using that word. And we do have like respect things when someone passes away in the building. We would always close the doors to the residents' rooms,
Right.
keep them all aside. I was fortunate enough to be there when my grandmother passed, and
Mm.
as a nurse's aide, even though I didn't work in that facility, they did allow me to help with her postmortem care.
Oh, wow.
And this was last summer, so there's still a pandemic going on. So like usually we don't, but I mean I was in scrubs, so she was like, if
Oh,
anybody walks in, you're in scrubs. I had just left my work
sure.
because I got the call my grandmother was passing. So I was able to be there and help with her postmortem care. And I understand how traumatic it can be to see your loved one with
Hmm.
plastic over them and after postmortem care. That's why we usually reserve that. Well, we do like an initial cleanup and
Yeah.
make them look peaceful, and we reserve the sheet and the plastic
Right.
cover and the toe tag till after they
Yeah.
leave.
I
Usually.
I wasn't prepared for that. I thought, I was prepared for the worst. And the worst was when I saw my father. My father died in my arms. My father had cancer. And, he was a skeleton, basically. He had suffered through cancer and treatment. And by the end there, it was just like, death is not pretty. My grandmother as well. It's like by the time we made it to see my grandmother, she had already passed. It's just, and and then when it comes for body removal, if they die at home, they usually ask you to go into another room so they can put them into the proper container and take them out of the house appropriately. And that's respectful too, but it can be super traumatic.
Yeah.
And the other thing with all of that is that there are two great YouTube channels. If you're able to, if you're able to, if you're able to go there, some people don't have the constitution to understand the funerary, the funeral industry. Ask a Mortician, Caitlin Dowdy,
Yeah.
and Carrie the Mortician, two amazing women who basically demystify the death industry. And both of them gave me the tools without knowing me, just through their pages and through their videos, gave me the tools to walk in to the funeral home and say direct cremation, alternative container. We can't have a service. And they were like, we can't offer a service at this point anyway. And then I got sick the next day, so it took a long time to get her ashes back because they were so backed up. There were
Yeah.
refrigerator trucks in front of every funeral home and in front of every hospital because people were dying at such an alarming rate. But those two ladies, I don't think that people understand, one, what a racket the funeral industry is and can be, and also that there are ways to that you can still care for your love. Like if I wanted to, I could have gone to the funeral home or to the nursing home and bathed her and got her dressed for, I could have done that had I been comfortable with it. Now, granted, I'm not comfortable around dead bodies. That's just not my thing. So I probably would not have, but I didn't know it was an option. Knowing it was an option and knowing the options that are out there are just like, what? Wait a minute. I've never heard of this. What is this? So these two ladies, I highly recommend check them out, because it's not that they're visceral or macabre. They're both very, very good at explaining why and how certain things are done in the funeral industry and how care of a loved one happens. And the funeral home we chose was right around the corner from me. So I just had this really good feeling from them as well. They were traumatized when I walked in, not from us or for anything that happened. They were traumatized because they were overloaded already, and it was March 21st.
Yeah.
Crematories can only operate a certain amount per day. And in New York City, there's not that many. So you basically, when there's just too many people, you have no place to put them, and there's no place to process them. So it took a while for everything to catch up. But that's just part of it. That's how the industry works. But it was those two ladies that helped me through that time. And they don't need, I sent them both the book. Carrie actually, she mentioned it on her podcast, which was kind of cool.
Oh, nice.
And the idea behind thanking somebody for that is, that's we're taught a certain thing. We're taught a certain way when it comes to being a caregiver, and then what happens after. Being Sicilian, everybody had the pageantry. They had the viewing. There were 3 viewings. There was a mass, then there was another mass, then there was a mass before the burial, then there was the closing of the casket. It's like, and then I went to a Jewish funeral where the person died the day before. They're in a pine box and they're gone. And then you're with the family. Like, there's so many different rituals that are out there. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's also something that we're not familiar with, that everybody cares for people after they die in very specific ways. And it's very traditional. Also, there are many different ways that we look at death in a very different capacity, as far as like just humans in general. We all just have a way of processing it. So, and it was, like I said, it was not what I expected. I didn't expect the lovely nightgown and the peaceful look and the arms crossed over the chest, because I knew that was not going to happen without embalming. And I knew that there's only certain ways that you can make people look peaceful.
Yeah.
But I wasn't expecting the CSI, on almost on the table kind of look to it. It was very jarring, and it's something that I'll never forget. I'll never forget my father's death, because I felt him leave. I felt his body relax, and I just felt everything go cold. And I'll never forget that, because that was just as traumatic as seeing my mother post-mortem. Death it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you see them. Even if you see them in the casket and they've been embalmed and they've been cosmetized, it doesn't take away that trauma, that they're gone. They're gone forever. And, in that capacity, at least. So.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And like I said, I've been on various ends of that spectrum with death and caring for people post-mortem, being at funerals, losing loved ones. I can understand what that's like for family. I have a lot of compassion. I want to change gears just a little bit, if that's okay.
Yeah.
My next question, do you know what type of dementia your mother had?
Do not know. I know that she knew who I was and she knew my cousins, but she didn't know everybody.
Okay. I was wondering if it was Alzheimer's or like Lewy body disease, or
it definitely wasn't Alzheimer's, because she knew the way that it was explained to me. A person with dementia can look at a set of keys and not know which key opens which lock. A person with Alzheimer's can look at the keys and say, what is that? So there were two different ways that the brain, two different parts of the brain that are deteriorating at that time. My mother was, she was forgetful. She would repeat herself. She also thought that it was 1960 a lot. Like she thought that she had a 1960 green DeSoto truck that was downstairs. It was in the parking garage, and that at any moment she was going to leave and go back home. I was like, okay, and I would have to humor her, and I would have to divert the conversation. So, but I don't know. I don't know exactly what kind of dementia. I would just say the kind that breaks your heart. All of it does.
That's everyone, yeah.
No matter what it is, you're watching them slowly fade away. It's like the way that we deal with people passing is different. If somebody dies suddenly, it's a shock, but you eventually process it. This is watching someone fade away daily. And then each month or each week, something else fades from them. When they start to remember people that have passed away, but they think are still alive. My father died in the early 90s. So my mom hadn't seen him since then. So, and then my grandmother died in 97. So she was remembering these two, and I would have to go with the conversation, live in her reality and say, oh, Dad's working late tonight. You saw him yesterday. Don't you remember? I would have to lie a little bit just to, and when I mentioned that, her face would light up. And then she would say, oh yeah, I saw him. That's right. Or something like that. And then she would be happy. There were many things that made her happy. And I just wanted to make her as happy as I could. It's like, if this is end of life preparation, that's the best way to do it, to make sure that she is as happy as possible. There's no way around it. It's just that you can't change the reality of somebody who's slowly dying.
Exactly.
Whether they're dying from a disease like cancer, or whether they're dying from something that's taking away their memories. Every day you are bombarded with the reminder that one day she's not going to be here. And that was sort of like the blessing in disguise, because we put so much on ourselves. We weigh heavily on the guilt that comes along with caregiving, and the guilt that comes along with putting somebody in care. And, it's like the guilt that I had about putting her into care was worse than, anything else, because I was like, I can't change this. But I knew intellectually that she was going to be in a better place and cared for. And I loved the nursing home that she was in. They took great care of her. They looked after her. The activities director and her, even though they got along, they fought a lot. But they fought a lot in the way that, like, you would fight with your sister or brother. And, she really loved Marilyn over at the nursing home. So, and her favorite nurse was Paul. And Paul was just the one person who would give me, would just be like, this is what's going on. This is how we handle it. This is what I can do for you. He was very direct in that, but it was comforting that he loved her. Like you could see that he took care of her, and that it was, if it was like his own mother or his own grandmother, he would be doing the same thing.
Yeah. No, and I can relate to that as, someone who used to work in a long-term care facility. We had a lot of residents we would get close to, and oftentimes we would hear just hysterical things. So my next question is, has your mom ever, and I want to actually, if it's okay with you after this question, I screenshotted a couple things that I figure would be appropriate to share.
Whatever you want to share from the book, you can share the whole book on this podcast if you want.
I can't share the whole book. I
No.
try to keep some of the
I want people to buy it. I want people to buy it too. So,
yeah, I'm not going to share the whole book, but I'm going to share some things.
Sure.
Some of the things are a little bit raunchier. This is not a book for children.
No.
Obviously. But it is, I highly recommend it. It is hysterical. Like I said, I've been flipping through it today, and I am just almost in stitches. laughing reading it because I can relate. I've heard sometimes similar things. But
Oh, the
has your
one you
mom
told
ever
me.
embarrassed you with
Oh my
something
God,
she said?
yes. She
Like where you
embarrassed me from the time I was a kid to the funniest thing. Well, my favorite quote is, so my one of my friends was very heavily pregnant, and so I was flipping through pictures because I always took pictures at work, and I'd show my mom, and so my friend Jamie Lee was here, and I said, "This is my friend Jamie Lee. She's 9 months pregnant." My mom goes, "Oh my God, she could go anytime. Bob, tell her to get a barbecue chicken wing and dangle it down there to coax him out. It worked for you." So that was my favorite. But she would like like blurt things out in the middle of the activities room, you know she was just a character with that, and yeah, so
No, that's it.
that's my favorite.
That was actually the first quote that I screenshot that I was like, oh my God, if I don't share this with the world, that had me laughing so hard. And
And her nicknames for her body parts as well.
yeah, I have a couple of those. That's clean enough I can share it. So
Yeah.
that one had me laughing. The next one I want to share is the hoarding the A&D women.
The what?
The
Oh
it's great for
yes.
your hiney.
It's great for your hiney. Yeah, and so I'm heavily tattooed. So if you see, so I use A&D ointment after tattooing. So she had hoarded all of this, and I was like, "Oh, I use it on my tattoos." She's like, "Oh, it's great for your hiney," and so she ended up giving. She would hoard sugar packets, her underwear drawer. I put her clothes away. I lift up a pair of panties to make room. All the silverware falls out of her underwear. She was hoarding silverware from the cafeteria. She was hoarding sugar packets. She was hoarding A&D ointment. It was hysterical to me, and I would just like I would go to the nurse, and then she would. There was one time they had a Halloween party, and they were allowed to have, if they didn't have sugar diabetes or anything like that, they were allowed to have a treat now and then. And I used to always bring my mother peanut butter chocolate cakes. When we were children, she made the best chocolate cake from scratch and peanut butter icing. So it's like a peanut butter cup. So Funny Bones they're like the Twinkie version where they're filled with peanut butter. So I would bring those to her all the time. But this one time was a Halloween party, and she's in bed, and somebody had taken. Usually, there's a visitor chair or two in each room, and somebody had taken the chair out, so it was her wheelchair was sitting there, and she was on the bed. So I'm visiting, and I sat down on the wheelchair, and I was like, "Why is this lumpy?" She had stolen all of the peanut butter cups, literally a bag, no lie, the entire bag. I don't know how she got away with it, but she put it under the padding of her wheelchair seat, and of course they were all smashed. But I was like, "What the heck?" And it just like I that, and for some reason she also I would bring her. She needed Rolaids a lot, and I know, and I wasn't supposed to originally we were allowed to, but then as she got more into the space, they were like, "Please don't bring her candy or anything like that, because she could choke, but like the I literally bought, this is what stopped it. I bought her a bottle of Rolaids, like the bottle, and it, like a week later, it was gone. And she's like, "Can you bring me another bottle of Rolaids?" And I was like, "Why? I just bought them for you." And she's like, "I ate them. Did you think I put them on my salad as croutons?" And I was like, "I think you did, because you ate 100 Rolaids in 1 week." So there were little, like the hoarding was just I still have pictures of the underwear drawer filled with all of the and she would pack every night. She would literally take everything out of the closet, everything out of the drawers, suitcases, whatever. And I finally took her suitcase away from her when she was not in the room, so that she wouldn't pack. But she would put everything in the garbage bags. Like, I'm leaving now. And then I would
Yeah.
have to go in and I would unpack everything and put it neatly in there. And then 24 hours later, it would be gone in 2, 3 garbage bags. And, it does break your heart a little bit when you do that. But I was just like, oh my God, lady. But yeah, she embarrassed me a lot in public. Even when we were kids, it was just part of it.
Yeah, those are definitely symptoms of dementia. Unfortunately, especially the hoarding. I've seen that a lot. I actually
Yeah.
had a resident one day when I worked on an Alzheimer's unit. The son came in and he goes, "My mom has like 90 necklaces on and not a single one of them are hers." And I was like, "We don't know where she got them from because they just, the residents would just walk in a room, see something they like, oh,
Yep.
that must be mine, grab it and walk out." And that's why it's so important to not bring valuable items into especially memory
Oh
care
no,
units.
right.
It's so important because in a lot of times staff gets blamed for things that go missing. And
She
in
lost her teeth
staff's defense, a lot of
and two
times they can't.
phones. 2 phones and her teeth.
Yep.
Most of the problem was she would take her phone, put it on the tray at lunchtime, cover it with a napkin by mistake, and forget to put it back in. She always kept it in her bra, by the way. She always kept her phone in her bra. And I would be like, Mom, and I'd be like, Mom, where's your phone? Right here between the only 2 suckers I can trust. And then I would take her phone out and I would look at the messages because my cousins would call her incessantly. And I would like, she does not get your messages until I show. So literally I would have to like play the messages for them. But yeah, 1 set of teeth. She had to get top dentures made there. Thank God for Medicare. Because I wouldn't have been able to pay for that. That was just like astronomical. But 2 phones,
Yeah.
because they let her have the phone, and I felt like it was safe enough that she knew how to charge it. She knew where it was. It was kind of like a thing for her that she had a ritual. Ritual is really important. And so at the end of the night, she would plug the phone in, pick it up the next day, put it in her bra, and then if she needed to call me, she knew how to call me. But then by the 3rd phone, I just said, I can't buy another phone for her, because it was not like a very expensive phone either. I bought her a flip phone. I bought her the cheapest one because she didn't know how to operate anything. An iPhone would have been like impossible to show her.
Yeah.
Not that I could even afford to send her an iPhone, but it was just the idea that it was a ritual that I gave her, and I would remind her all the time. But yeah, 2 phones and a pair of teeth gone.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate effect.
Yeah.
So another quote from the book: these male nurses are nice. Excuse me. These male nurses are nice, but when they help you in the John, I warn them what you're about to see is not new. I can just imagine, like. I can imagine being a son. And then another one, a little old man with a walker walks by in a robe. Now that one, he's just looking in here to see if I'm naked.
Yes.
Like I said, these are things that's close to things that I've heard before working
The
in
funny
memory.
thing is, there's 2 quotes about a little old man. There's that same little old man is the little old man that was in the elevator that she looked at and said, "Bob, he's my lover." And she said to the man.
I screenshotted that one too. Yeah.
That's what kept me sane.
What did the
Sharing
man
that.
say when she said that? Like what?
I don't remember.
Did you turn red?
I was yeah, I totally like I was in shock. I was like, "Oh God," because she also when she would go to the ER. So I wrote 2 books, just so you know. The first book was her quotes, but I started writing a cookbook first. And the cookbook is called Escape to Ravioli Mountain, a memoir in food. This is my hard copy right now. It's in editing hell right now. I don't recommend writing a book unless you know a good editor, because I am not. It is not in my wheelhouse. But writing that one first brought me back to my childhood. we're in the emergency room. Had to be February 2020. She had fallen. She had had different gastric issues. She had breathing issues. There was stuff, a bunch of stuff. We're sitting there, and I sat there for 18 hours with her in the emergency room. She perks up and she goes, "Bob, do you know you were conceived on a beaver dam on a camping trip?" And I was like, "Excuse me," just random. And then, and then I talked to my cousin. I was like, "Did you ever hear this story?" She said, "Oh yes, your mother told the story about going on a camping trip and having sex on a beaver dam." I don't know if you have to bleep that out, but that was how outlandish some of her stories were.
No, I can't even imagine. I wouldn't want to know that information either. I totally get it.
And it was sort of like, but it was so random. She just perked up and just blurted it out, And I told you my first words, but we can't say those on this podcast.
Yeah, we have to keep it a little bit clean.
Yeah, no, absolutely,
but this is just, your mom just sounds like I'm telling you, she sounds like she probably would have been my favorite patient if I had the privilege of caring for her. And you writing this book is bringing her gift of humor that has been a coping strategy for you to the world. So I'm grateful for her gift, because this book also, like I said, I started reading it and I'm just hysterical. I can see this being a breath of fresh air for caregivers. So with that, where can my audience find you?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say one last thing. One of the funniest phone calls I ever got was this past December. A friend of mine had the book and she left it on the back of the toilet in her house, and she had a Christmas party, and she was hearing howling, cackling laughter from the restroom, and she held the phone up to the restroom and she's like, "Bob, I can't believe this, but somebody is reading your book in the bathroom, cackling so loud." And then everybody would go into the bathroom to read the book. But you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Bobby Hedglin-Taylor or at Escape to Ravioli Mountain. Escape to Ravioli Mountain is the name of the cookbook, but it's also my author page. So both books are represented there. And you can find the book Shit My Mama Says, hashtag Shit My Mama Says. A humorous look at life while dealing with dementia is on Amazon right now, but it will be reissued and it'll be on Walmart.com and BarnesandNoble.com probably this summer.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Bobby, for coming on. Your story is just incredible, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, and I just wish all caregivers the best of luck, the biggest of hugs. We're in the trenches, and even after someone's gone, you're still working through it. So, and I applaud anybody who was a healthcare worker during this time period. You have been, put through something that no one should have to go through at such an alarming rate. But I kudos to everyone who wears scrubs to work.
Thank you.
It is a gift, and it is a beautiful thing that you have that skill set to help people, and you're all processing your trauma too. So, hey, a little bit of laughter helps. So.
Exactly. And again, thank you to my former coworkers, and I hope that any of you that listen, I hope that you do check out the book. With that, we'll wrap up this week's episode of Caregiver Chronicles. You can find us at caregiverchroniclespod@gmail.com for our email. We are on Instagram, Caregiver Chronicles 2, Facebook, Caregiver Chronicles, and Twitter, Caregiver Chron 1. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.